Hey everyone, this is Goopy, and welcome to what I'm calling the Day Shift. This is a very rough draft pilot episode of what I essentially want to be a Deadlock Esports show each week. 10-minute or less recap of what you missed from last week, maybe some kind of big storylines happening that lead us into this upcoming week's matches, which we're going to get into just here in a second. And before we get started with this week's matches, just a quick note, if you're coming to this video a little bit later, maybe like tonight or even tomorrow, later in the week, we do have written recaps, like you can see this one for DLNS 48, where Pauper's Pupils took down the kind of new look melee creeps. You can definitely go check those out on the site. Otherwise, just kind of run of show wise for how I think this could work. What I'd like to do is just start the show off, typically, like this is very rough draft, won't be like this in future videos, with basically the biggest news from the last week, might even touch on some of the results from last week, and then look ahead to what people can expect from Deadlock Night Shift. You know, the whatever one is coming up next. This week will be 49, next week is 50, super wild. As the esport grows, though, we will talk about more and more events. There's already more happening. There's APAC Deadlock, there's South American Deadlock, there's a lot of other stuff popping up, and so we'll absolutely cover it in this video. For now, though, Deadlock Night Shift will be the focus. All right, so to kick things off, let's start off with this interview from PeerContent I did this past week with EDL. This is the head coach of Pauper's Pupils, and there was actually something in this. I mean, this kind of serves as a recap as well. DLNS 48, Pauper's Pupils ended up taking down melee creeps 2-1. I mean, match 1 and 2, very back and forth. Goober, very dominant in match 1. Bit of a step back in match 2. I mean, Xeno average, League having pretty good games there. But match 3 was this really fascinating draft, I thought, from Pauper's Pupils. There's no like traditional M1 gun carry. And Goober still, I don't know if anyone watched this game, but Goober had an unbelievable like mechanical early game, was hitting these crazy barrel angles. And I asked PeerContent about their draft strategy going into this, and he revealed that basically throughout the middle of their draft, third pick, second man, fourth sequence, this bit right here, was really all to shut down Goober. And then, I mean, PeerContent kind of was complimentary. He still ended up having an incredible game. So this article, this interview rather, was a really good look into, to me, how professional teams handle drafts and some of the things they talk about. I mean, especially how much you have to debate about your first pick and first ban based on what side you're on, what order you're in the draft. There's a lot of really good stuff here. But as I said, this was a huge result last week. Pauper's Pupils taking down the kind of new look melee creeps with Birdie, OCs, Snakes was filling in for Braden. Should see that kind of full roster this week. But to me, the biggest piece of news this week actually is still in NA here, and that is that Pulsar have signed Aiden, Crayon, Hydration, Scout, and Parzillion. Still looking for a 6th, but this is a former APAC kind of org roster team it will be managed by Zune moving forward. This is actually someone who I also interviewed with EDL right when I got started here. This is a really interesting team, though. I mean, this is a team with a really good blend of experience. You have Hydration, Aiden, Scout with a lot of notable experience, all on different teams. Crayon, as we were pointed out here, is maybe newer to competitive Deadlock, but has been in the scene for a long time. If you watch Deadlock Esports streams or a lot of those players, you're going to see Crayon involved. Parzillion is going to make his DLNS debut on DLNS 49. Very excited. Another player who's been competitively heavily involved in the scene for a long time, just hasn't found his way onto a roster yet. So this is a really exciting team, and like I said, will be making their debut against melee creeps in DLNS 49. But officially now looking to DLNS 49, EU is certainly going to be an interesting start. Silence lost to Leviathan in the qualifier match. This makes sense a little bit, at least, after losing OCs to melee creeps officially. OCs will not be able to compete in both EU and NA, so he will be competing with melee creeps moving forward as their 6th. But that's going to set up, like we said, Buff Enjoyers versus Leviathan. Buff Enjoyers are going to be coming into this one very heavily favored. This, I mean, by all accounts, should be a runaway victory for them, but you never know. I mean, Silence is one of those teams that, is in the comp scene in the EU, certainly could put up kind of a surprise fight, surprise win. That would set up, though, if it were to be the case that Buff Enjoyers were to win, that would set up an Abrahams versus Buff Enjoyers grand finals. And this is a battle we have seen time and time again in the EU. Abrahams, notably, though, getting the best of Buff Enjoyers last week in a 2-1. But I mean, and ZP's pointed out, I've pointed out in write-ups before. I mean, look at all of these 2-1s. Deadlock Night Shift 48, 7, 6, and 5, 45. I mean, 4 Deadlock Night Shift grand finals in a row, going the full distance in EU. Really excited to see how this one pans out. But Abrahams, like I said, looked good last week. They've added Sharik, and they look really good with him. We're kind of able to put some pieces together, so could certainly still continue to be a force against Buff Enjoyers. And funny enough, we have a lot of the same kind of competition brewing in NA. This is the series history between Pauper's Pupils and Melee Creeps. Obviously, these teams would only play in the grand finals if Melee Creeps is able to take down Pulsar in the challenger match. That's another one they'll probably be favored in, I would at least think. But again, both teams somewhat new. Both teams have comp experience, so that challenger match of Melee Creeps versus Pulsar rather could really be an interesting one. But I mean, this is another one where again, 4 weeks in a row, this has gone the full distance. Pauper's Pupils winning 2 in a row at this point is a little bit, I mean, all of this is difficult to say, difficult to talk about in a greater context because of the roster changes to Melee Creeps. I mean, we're effectively talking about a completely different team last week. And then, I mean, everything moving forward is going to feel different. So this is interesting historical context to some degree, but I really do think, again, we have to think of this series between these two teams as being almost something completely fresh. Again, in the light of Ido, Dew, and Fishcake departing Melee Creeps. And last bit of recap before I get to my official predictions for this week's night shift. To talk about APAC a little bit, we've had a really good rivalry brewing over the summer between OT and Oscar. OT being a fully kind of Australian team, Oscar being a notably half Australian, half Korean team. All of these being former Overwatch League players. I talked to Disco Virtuoso last week, kind of one of their players, and, as someone who's been kind of a staple in APAC Deadlock for a long time. He doesn't really see this as a truly, like, I don't know, he doesn't necessarily see it as a rivalry. He has his sights set a little bit higher on playing in NA, but in any case, this has been a really good rivalry. Not all going the length, but I mean, there have been some series in here that have really, really gone the distance. So good to see some good competition happening over in Asia Pacific as well, a region that I think is going to surprise a lot of people in the future with how competitive they are in Deadlock. All right, and now for my official predictions for DLNS 49. Just a quick note, these are just for fun. I don't play favorites between teams. I try to cover the esport as objectively as possible. At the end of the day, though, I still want to make predictions and kind of have some fun with this. So I do think that Buff Enjoyers are going to take down Leviathan and EU in the first match. That would be quite the hill to climb for Leviathan, especially considering losing OCs this past week. That would set up, again, that Buff Enjoyers Abraham series that I think a lot of people have their eyes on. I think Buff Enjoyers are going to kind of get their revenge this week, get their get back. But I think that one's going to go to a 2-1 again, pending some crazy mid-tournament patch. I mean, we did get the patch yesterday with kind of a lot going on, but I do think Buff Enjoyers are going to take this one 2-1 in the EU. All right, and hopping over to NA now, I've actually got a little bit of a spicy prediction. I think Pulsar are going to take down Melee Creeps in the Challenger match. This would be one of those things that would feel tectonic when you just like say it out loud. Melee Creeps losing in the Challenger match to like a brand new team effectively. But with all the context behind the roster changes and everything else, and I actually really like this Pulsar team. I think that both them and Melee Creeps, there's certainly a level of unpredictability right now. This draft could look all kinds of wacky. I'll be very excited to watch this match when it happens. But in any case, I think Pulsar have a lot of valuable experience. I'll be very interested to see who their 6th is. But I think Melee Creeps has some hurdles of their own to overcome right now. I could see Pulsar snagging this one. It's a best of one though, so they're always a little bit wacky, I guess. But that would send Pulsar to the grand finals to take on Pauper's Pupils, where unfortunately I don't think they're going to have a good chance. I think Pauper's Pupils would take that one 2-0 if that were to be the case. So that will be my official prediction for NA. You know, PeerContent talked a lot about his team in a positive way, in particular their kind of mental development and how they've come together as a team. Still probably things to work out, but I feel like this team has developed quite a bit over the last couple months and look to be one of the strongest teams in the world right now. So it's time for me to clock out, but be sure to clock back in when Deadlock Night Shift kicks off at 3 p.m. Central. Also, like I said, this is in no way affiliated with Night Shift. If y'all ever want the name Day Shift, please just hit me up. I'll give it to you, ZP. I got you. Not trying to like step on any toes. Just a big fan of the esport, want to cover it. I love the midweek hype shows. I mean, you all have a, if you've watched Deadlock Night Shift, you might be familiar with Puckett. He was a huge part of this show called Watchpoint that happened for Overwatch League in its early days that I was like super hooked to. I love the kind of midweek way to keep up with Deadlock Esports. So if you're like me, maybe you want to see something like this as well. But like I said, this is a very rough draft pilot version. I just wanted to record something, kind of get a trial run going. I'll be off next week, but the week after that, I'll try to have something a bit more buttoned up to put together for a Deadlock Esports show each week. Be sure to leave your predictions in the comments for this week's Night Shift. Also, I was able to interview Apollo's voice actor, Chester Rushing, with a creator named Sleep this past week. That just released yesterday. Be sure to check that out. A lot of really cool stuff. I mean, if you're a Deadlock fan, it does feel like must watch. I mean, he gives a lot of cool insight into Valve's process and just a lot of stuff that I felt like was super, super fascinating. And he just slipped into Apollo, like voice acting in the mid-interview several times, which was just awesome. So in any case, go check that out. I'm going to clock out. Let the Night Shift folks clock in. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in. See y'all next time.